As livestock manager for elders and being in the business for 50 plus years, safety is the number one priority. Everyone at Elders has a work, health and safety duty. We do take this seriously. We've actually all got to take it seriously. But under stress, everyone behaves differently, people and animals. Both young and old need to assess livestock, and I think we need to assess livestock a bit differently. Why are we doing this? Because we do want everyone to go home safely.
Working with cattle, you can never predict 100% what's going to happen.
Livestock are so unpredictable. We need to be ready for anything to happen.
If you're working with livestock, there's always a chance of getting hurt.
We work long hours and you've got to just keep reminding yourself about safety.
Just trying to look after each other and make sure that no one gets hurt.
You're not just looking out for your own back, you're looking out for your teammates' back.
Especially when there's a fractious animal around, you've got to be very aware that you're safe as well as your team.
It's like a footy team. You've always got to have each other's back.
We can't be complacent in an environment like this. It can be very fatal.
In this industry, nobody is bulletproof.
Sunday arvo, penning up a few cattle for the sale, for your Monday sale, and turned around and a handful of steers there. One blew past beside of me, and another one just sort of went straight over the top of me and knocked me over onto the concrete. There was nothing I could do, and it's definitely scary.
Just a normal Finley fortnightly cattle market. James, Kenny and I were just drafting in the laneway. One of the cows must have turned around and must have got in the wrong spot at the wrong time or didn't move quick enough. When James yelled out, the cow was right upon me and hit me front on. I think I went about 3 metres backwards and landed on the concrete.
3 animals were in a pen. The one that I was trying to get out originally just come straight at me. He was just right off his tree, that steer, and he was just madder and madder. Took me by surprise, but he hit me full force and that was it. Bent me mobile phone. Well, when I hit the ground and he came back again, I thought, geez, I'm in a bit of trouble here. I just couldn't breathe. The pain was excruciating. Look, if he spun around and kicked me in the head, then I would have been in real trouble. In our job, there's a lot of near misses, but this time I just ran out of luck.
Fractured skull in between my eyes to the back of my head. I had to have staples put in, bleeds on the brain.
3 months off work, fractured ribs, fractured skull, and at the end of the day it was about 3 bleeds on the brain.
Broke 3 ribs on the side, 3, 4 and 5. If he'd come in the 3rd time, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. Carol and my partner, one of the agents rang her. She got a shock, so she knew things weren't going 100% right.
And my wife, well, she had to get to Melbourne, so it was a bit of a shock for her. And James, who was with me when the accident happened, he was shaken up a fair bit. And work colleagues, we all become very good friends and they don't like seeing colleagues hurt.
It's not just the party that has been injured, family, friends, staff members that are directly affected by the injury.
You've seen a bloke on the ground unconscious, blood coming from him and everything else. And as a group, you're probably pretty shaken. You're not ready for it, you're not expecting it.
A lot of us have been in the industry for maximum 5 or 6 years and we probably hadn't seen anything like that. We all love to have a laugh and a joke and we certainly don't want to see anyone get hurt and really hit home.
For young people coming into the industry, safety has to be at the forefront and going home safe has to be their #1 priority.
Everyone deserves the right to go to work and go home at the end of the day safely to their friends and family.
I left school and started working in the livestock industry all my life since 1979 and it gets a bit frustrating when you can't get out.
Obviously handling livestock is sort of something you definitely can't do for a period of time, and definitely challenging not being able to do that.
One thing I've learnt from this experience is you must be prepared for something like this to happen.
You only be a second of complacency, an accident's going to happen like that. And it could have been fatal.
You definitely probably take a second guess or a second approach to things nowadays. How could you do that better, or how could you handle a situation probably a bit more safe?
No job's too important to jeopardise your safety or the safety of your work colleagues.
So risk management. The first part's identifying the hazards. You need to be thinking about the hazards that are going to present themselves in this environment. And this can be done through maybe the conversation with the client, the casual conversation, but you need to have your peripheral vision on, thinking about all the areas where you or your client or maybe fellow staff are potentially going to be at risk. Look out for motor vehicles, what's coming, whether that's in the mustering process, whether that's around when you're working around the facility. Look out for obviously the yard facility that you're working in and the animals. The environment's a huge one and plays probably the most important factor. What's the weather doing on that particular day? Certainly what are the conditions that you're working in? Are they muddy? Are you on concrete? Is it slippery? Is it dry? Is it hard? Mobile phones are a huge hazard in our business. Leave them in the car. It's also good agency practice to be completely present. These are all the factors that are going to impact the behaviour of the animals, but also how you're going to handle them in the facility you've got to work with. Risk management, assess the risks. So you've identified your hazards, you've got your head in the game. When you walk into those set of yards, for instance, and you're about to start handling your livestock, this is the point where you really need to identify the risks that present themselves in this environment. Number one, your animals. They're probably your biggest risk and how they're going to behave. On the back of that, you've identified your environment. So work out what the environment is, what the flooring is that you're working in, get a feel for it, move around those yards. Be aware of your gate impact zone. Know what the field is of where the gate moves, and make sure if you're closing a gate, you're standing outside that impact zone, that if it quickly comes back on you. In the instance where you can't get out of the way, position yourself in a safe manner. The best way to do this is foot on the gate, that if it does come back, it's not going to hit you in the mouth, it's actually going to push you out of the way. All these little factors are going to be important if something goes against what you're thinking is going to happen with those cattle. In the environment of working with the animals, you need to work out a way practical that you can control the risk. We need to use the hierarchy of control to work out how we can manage the risk. First point, top of the list is elimination. Where you can eliminate, that's your greatest asset. So with the example of some road cattle or wild cattle in a mob, taking them out to enable you to work the mob in a more effective, efficient manner. Second point, substitution. Substitute the way that you're going to do your job or the risk for something safer. You might be assisting a client to process some livestock through a racer environment. Examples like being able to use a pour-on drench rather than a needle vaccination that you've got to put your hand through rails is a substitution of that risk. Using better engineering controls. Isolate the hazard. When you're working with a particular mob that everyone is a rogue or everyone's hard to handle, you need to isolate yourself or the people around you from that hazard. Now, an example of this would be a really controlled yard environment where you can handle those cattle through a race and you can draft through a race or a crush. Sometimes this can't be done on farm, and the examples of that are, you might just say to the client, we need to get these on a truck and get them to a better facility. Administrative controls. So think about things that you can do in an administrative sense prior to actually handling the livestock. So things like training that we're doing now is obviously a key piece to that, but also other elements like information gathering or having the right information. You might get to a point where the cattle have just got to go straight to the processor, have all your information in place, and this might then lead to a quick and efficient process, you to be able to make a decision that's in the best interest of yourself, the client and the livestock. PPE, personal protective equipment. So the small things like long sleeve shirts, hats, jeans, good work boots, they're all important PPE. On a higher level, things like helmets, chest guards, vests need to be considered if you're working in an environment or with livestock that can cause significant risk. And the last point, regularly check the environment and the control and the risk as you're working through, because these things are changing all the time. Doesn't matter what sale yards or what environment I'm in, always do a quick assessment of the environment I'm going to draft in. So obviously large pen here, we've got a pen of cattle there that we're going to bring over in a sec, but in terms of the penning itself, it's quite big. Always look for some get out of jail zones. So if the cattle are a bit agitated, you want some spots to get out of jail. So you've got a rail that you can quickly jump up on to get above the cattle. If you look on this side, you've got another one here next to a ramp, has got a rail that is
sticks out, so that can be a hindrance and a help. Important to have a look at your flooring. There's obviously grated concrete in here, but so that's just a general assessment. Water trough over there. It's about 35 degrees out here. Black cattle, so they're probably not the happiest. They're a little bit uncomfortable. They've been standing on concrete, so we're just going to bring these cattle in. So in this situation, probably best just open the gate, give the cattle a good look, come around on the other side. Always like to talk to my cattle. Walk out. Hey, hey, hey. Have a look, have a look, have a look. Have a look. Good. Walk up, walk up. That's a big one for me, is always talking to the cattle, always, and I'll explain a bit more of that in a second, but I always like to talk to my cattle. Okay, so we moved our cattle into the larger area. If you've got the chance, not always possible, but if you can let them get a little bit settled in their environment before you draft them, always better. Not always the case.
Okay, so we're moving into the livestock handling now, and we're going to talk about cattle behaviour. You'll see in this video some examples of cattle behaviour, but obviously the flighty cattle, you might see the tail whipping, you might see the ears moving back and forth. They're all examples of cattle behaviour you need to be aware of.
Aim of the game is here, is obviously do the work as quickly and efficiently as possible and not get kicked, bowled over, or hurt yourself or the cattle in any way. So you can see here I'm right in the middle, so obviously that's a sign of cattle. Like, they're getting a little bit agitated, as I mentioned earlier. The cattle, black cattle, 35-degree day. They're in an environment where they don't really want to be. They're standing on concrete, so just be wary. Okay, walking in here, you know, your cattle behaviour. If I'm using my stick, see how the cattle rear, you poke it in the ribs, it rears, it wants to kick out, okay? These are all the protective behaviours that you'll see in your cattle. Naturally, those that have worked with cattle a lot are fully aware of those, but you want to keep the cattle as calm as possible. Obviously going in like so, you know, that's when the cattle jump, they run, you know, you're stressing them out. You've got a chance that the cattle are going to hurt themselves, or they circle around you like they are now, and I don't know. If there's a mad one here, it could circle in, hit me from behind. So working in that calm, giving the cattle plenty of room, allowing them to mob up, and obviously move back into here.
We all understand that the cattle are positioned with eyes on their head and they have a large field of vision. If you're standing directly behind the cattle in this particular demonstration, you present yourself a risk because you're outside that field of vision.
If you're working cattle and you're going to come in behind them, directly behind them, right behind them in this area, they can't see you, okay? What do? They move. If they can't move, one of their reactions is to kick out, because that's a protective mechanism for them. Now, I'm talking all the time, and I touched on it earlier. You talk to your cattle and you tell them where you are, you see their ears are turned back, they want to know where I am. But once again, if I get in close in behind here, you know, this animal can't see me, he wants to turn, he wants to see me. This one here, it's looking at me down the side there. Cattle directly behind, they're turning. Okay, so that's making sure that you're just aware of what their vision zone is. If they can see you, you're a lot safer. If you're in a spot where they can't see you, and you surprise them in particular, that's when they'll kick out and hurt.
Okay, so our next demonstration is talking about the zones, and that's in particular when you start to handle your cattle. So the first zone is your pressure zone, and that's in a region that you will see in this example where the cattle are aware that you're there but are not moving. Gives you a chance to assess. Then you move into the flight zone, and this is the area that you're generally working your livestock, your flight zone. Okay, so it's the area where the cattle will be aware of your presence and they'll want to try and get away from you. The third zone, and probably presents the greatest risk, is the fight zone. Okay, so it's when you're moving in really close to that animal where it feels threatened. It's either going to run, jump, or fight you.
Okay, cattle zones. We'll talk about the different pressure zones and the different cattle zones. So where I am here is pretty much the relaxed zone. It allows me to assess the cattle, so we're getting close to drafting. The cattle are relaxed, I'm far enough away, I'm not a threat to them. and I can do a good assessment of the cattle. I can get a good view on what might be agitated, what I potentially want to draft out, and do the work and do it as effectively and efficiently as possible. As I move in here, I start to move into the pressure zone. So you can see here, I'm in a pressure zone. The cattle can clearly hear me talking, obviously, but they're like, yeah, there's a bit of pressure here. I'm not worried, but I want to move away to a point where I'm not under threat. If I get into a bit closer, I start to move into the flight zone. So you see there, the immediate reaction of the cattle with my talking was for the cattle to move. Now, if I come right in here quickly, I'm in the fight zone, okay? So I'm in that area that if I push, kick, hunt, those cattle are gonna kick out. So they're effectively your 4 zones, okay? And not always, like you might be in a small yard, so you haven't got that zone in your yard in terms of a assessment zone. That's usually what you do outside your yard. Once you move in to a smaller yard over here, you're really gonna be bordering on pressure and even that flight zone, okay, with that number of cattle. Now, you can't always be keeping an eye on your cattle, okay? Golden rule, never turn your back on the cattle. So effectively, if you get that, you want to look for your closest point to allow the cattle to mob out, and you can get a complete view of all your cattle. Okay, so we're just going to touch again on that pressure side of things. So obviously we've shown plenty of examples of that flight zone. Okay, if the cattle get too agitated, very quickly releasing that pressure, but you want to make sure that you've got a clear area that you can go backwards in, okay, allow those cattle relax and set again. Obviously coming in, that one, well, we don't want them to go that way. We don't want them to circle like they did before. So that's just an example of that release of pressure. In a smaller yard setting, if you're drafting in a tighter yard setting, you might come in, too much pressure, whoop, I'm going to release the pressure here. I'm going to go up. So they're just some examples of that pressure release area when you're working in those pressure, flight and fight zones.
So the next demonstration looks at points of balance, and that's positioning yourself either on an individual animal or a mob of cattle where they have a point of balance. And that's positioning yourself that if you move to the left, they might move to the right or vice versa. Understand your points of balance from in front, from the side and behind.
So we're going to talk about point of balance now with your cattle. This is something everyone will generally do naturally with handling cattle, but it's when you've got your cattle in control. So you've got them in a mob that you want. So your point of balance is effectively wanting to hold them here where they are. So we've got the cattle at a point of balance. Obviously, you need to really work on an animal, you need to get in close if you're trying to cut an individual out, all right? And what we want to talk about is your points of balance. Now, the point of balance on cattle, and sheep for that matter, is always in front of or behind the shoulder. And what we'll do an exercise here in a second. I'll work on this large steer over here. So we've got this large steer over here. I'm going to work on his point of balance and I'm going to separate him from the mob. So I'm going to come in here, he's pushing into the corner. He knows that I want him, okay? I'm going to get him to a position here. Other cattle, right, I'm on the point of balance here and I'm going to separate him out. And I'm just working forward and behind that shoulder. He doesn't like it, he wants to get back to his mates. Got stress cattle around me. Okay, so I'm on the point of balance. See, if I stand in front of him, he goes back. So I'm holding him there. If I go behind, see, he goes forward. So that's your real point of balance. I'm focusing on that shoulder. Point of balance. He's balanced there. If I go in front, back he goes. If I stay behind, he's going to walk forward. But then if I get in front of him here, in front of that shoulder, I can turn him out.
The next demonstration you're going to see drafting of cattle. We all love drafting cattle. It's one of the joys of our job and our industry. Drafting cattle is utilising all those previous points we've spoken about. Pressure release, moving inside and out of your pressure zone and your flight zone, drafting back and forth. This demonstration, utilises and shows those pressure zones that enables you to work safely.
So now we're going to actually focus on the drafting of the animals. Now, in this particular mob, may or may not be able to see it, might be able to see it from above, but there's 4 animals here with a pink shoulder, and today we're going to draft those cattle out. Okay, now, we just saw that movement of cattle and going back and forward, all right, and that there wasn't a lot of stress there. There wasn't a concern if the cattle ran past us. Here we're actually making sure that we are putting that block on and only letting past the ones that we want to draft out, okay? So key areas to focus on, and look, there's a few cattle here that do really want to run, okay? So you've got to be mindful of when to block and when to stay, okay? And a lot of that is points of balance, talking to your animals, giving them enough room but not letting them run. So we're just going to demonstrate the drafting technique. A lot of it will be moving, not in a lot more. Where we saw that flow was just moving back and forward. This will be moving more in a technique like this. So I'm just drafting out the pink shoulders. I've got one there. I think there's about 4 of them. So we'll let him go. Walk around, walk around. That's not one. There's one. Got one inside, so I'm going to step inside there and I can close that space off for those others. There's 3. Identifying the last one. He's on the outside. So sometimes you just got to wait and let your cattle get in the right position for themselves. There he is. He's going to walk around and out he goes. Block, wait. Keep facing the cattle so they don't want to run through you. Took a little bit of time, we got it sorted, shut the gate.
Okay, next demonstration is our zigzag technique, and that's obviously moving a mob of cattle in a laneway and a yard, utilising the zigzag technique. This directly relates to the field of vision, where the animals need to be able to see you. So by moving in that zigzag, as you'll see, that enables the animal to know where you are and continue to move in the direction you want.
Okay, now make sure I'm working in that field of vision all the time with those cattle. I'm going to move up in this zigzag formation. Move up, hey. And if you're walking them down the laneway, hey. Naturally they don't want to go to where people are standing. They're not mobbing up quite as well, but they'll move back to that corner quite well. Walk up, cattle. Always talking to your cattle. Make sure they can see you, so move around here. Yep. Hey, walk up, and then I'm walking in that zigzag formation. So we're going to move these cattle around, and we're going to let them move down their laneway and the recommended area. Now a normal process might be walking behind, giving them a whack, okay, but you're not focusing on those fields of vision. Okay, so you want to be behind, and you want to be doing a zigzag type motion. So you see the cattle walk around there, they're pretty happy to go out there. I'm moving them down a laneway. They move pretty quickly, but you just want to be working side to side. Okay, they've blocked up there. The other reason for that, you get that opportunity to get up out of the way. Okay, now in a situation like this, cattle don't generally want to move behind you. Okay, so got an option here. Go out through a gate. We can leave that gate open. Allow the cattle to turn back. Back you go, calves. Walk back, walk back, walk back. Okay, they're a little bit more tentative to go out. But you want to be doing that zigzag so they get the chance to see where you are as well as talk to your cattle.
Next up, we have the inverted T. This is best suited in a large holding paddock environment where you actually work from behind the animals to push them in the direction that you wish them to go. So the inverted T is working in a straight line process from the furthest diagonal point to where you want them to go. But then once you get them moving in that direction, it's incorporating your zigzag technique as well, where you're moving back and forth across the animals so they can see you in their field of vision.
The inverted cattle technique, possibly a bit more use in a larger yard environment. So at holding paddock, for instance, where you want them to go out the gate, we might open the gate and we'll demonstrate that from on the other side there as the cattle move over near that ramp. Okay, so the cattle are clearly in that corner. I'm going to move around behind them. We want them to go back out that gate area, walk up, walk up, walk up. They're going to move around. They see that spot. I just create pressure. As mentioned, it's probably a bit more practical in a larger holding yard. It's working that area from that furthest point of pressure, so you've got that angle piece right across. All you're really doing is creating pressure so those cattle head in the direction that you want them to. This environment here, the cattle know that that was the out zone, so that's where they went.
Our next demonstration is dot the eye technique. We use this every day when we're counting our livestock, whether it's sheep and whether it's cattle. Dotting the eye, and the example shows just moving from the point where you want the animals to exit from, back and forth. So you're releasing your pressure and you're putting pressure on to control the flow.
It's utilising that point of balance of your cattle to allow them to steadily run down. So it's not necessarily drafting, but it's allowing them to steadily run down a laneway. So a lot of time you'll use it for counting so they don't rush. Okay, but we've got some cattle, obviously our cattle here, starting to get a little bit agitated, heat, sick of being handled. I've opened the gate fully, okay? You notice there that gate sits off. Or you want to be wary that that can, if an animal hits, it can bounce out. But effectively all I'm doing here is I'm in my area here, so I'm in my block zone, got my stick, okay? And I've got my point of balance, so I'm utilising my point of balance. So the cattle clearly want to, we can see the cattle clearly want to go behind me, okay? I'm in a spot where I'm not letting them. As soon as I move to here, okay, move a little bit more, take the pressure off. Righto, if I want to slow it, woo, woo, woo. Okay, so I'm moving in, got to count. Slow, woo, 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 slowly. Okay, so it's that point of balance. I really didn't have to do a lot more here than go back and forward. I wasn't moving out in the pen there, wasn't allowing cattle to come around. Like I said, it's probably a technique when you want to count cattle, or sheep for that matter. It's understanding your point of balance, moving in and out, and allowing your stock to flow past you in an orderly manner, not really rush.
Animal welfare is a huge part of our industry. We need to make sure that we're considering animal welfare at all times. So that's the handling of our livestock, that's fit to load, that's water, shade, and the environment we're working on. The following are the key points to consider with animal welfare. Do's and don'ts of handling livestock. We all know them, have them fresh in your mind. Number one, bulls probably present the greatest risk. First point, never work bulls on your own. Too great a risk, not worth the risk. Never trust a bull. We've all come across those bulls that have been bucket reared, quiet, you can scratch under the ear. They present the greatest risk. Use a controlled environment to handle your bulls. Really important to be in a good facility, and if the facilities don't suit, find a facility where you can handle your bulls. Handling cows and calves. We all know the greatest risk for handling a cow and calf is when you separate that calf from the cow. Be aware, this is the point of greatest risk. An example of this, and should never be used around cows and calves, are dogs. Dogs create the greatest risk in handling cows, creating the cow to become agitated. Your final do and don't, never turn your back on the animals. Always have your eyes on the animal. General tips. They're just common sense practices. The following points highlight the general tips you need to be aware of.
I'm here as a client of Elders, and we have client yards that we have people come and go from every day. And that's our staff, stock and station agents, truck drivers and contractors. The most paramount thing you could have is a very safe set of yards to work in, one for your people but also for animal husbandry and the safety and welfare of livestock. No one wants to have an animal hurt or see it get hurt, but most importantly we also don't want our people hurt at any point in time through a process of drafting and working with cattle. So I've also have been in an accident in a set of cattle yards, and I was at a fat market, and as I've gone to the next pen, the actual walkway fell under my feet, and I was really lucky that my legs didn't get trapped. The buyers that were standing up against the fence all fell back into me, and it was a complete disaster. I'm grateful that I didn't lose my legs effectively because of how severe the fall was. And it just shows you old yards can be a big problem, and that to us is why safety is paramount on our farms, making sure that everyone's always kept safe. I cannot stress enough, if you're in a set of yards and they're not right, you need to speak up and have a chat with that farmer to make sure that they do something about it. When we identify risk, we try and fix it on the spot. Now, if that's a gate or if that's in the yards or a panel or whatever that looks like, you need to be able to speak up and talk to, one, your boss, and as a boss myself, I always make sure that my people are safe always around me, but also your client, whoever you're working with. Don't be afraid to talk and know that they're there to support you because you're doing the work for them.
So we've been through the cattle aspect of your livestock safety and handling. Now we're going to touch on sheep and the sheep yards. Obviously, a lot of the safety risks do come in our cattle handling and our cattle world, but we can't become complacent, and we have to always be aware of our surroundings and what we're doing in the sheep yard. We've got a saying in the industry, cattle can kill, but sheep can cause significant injury. One of the biggest risks in a mob of sheep is when a single animal will break out. Say if there's a dog working the mob of sheep, if a single animal breaks out and comes back and could hit you in the knees or the lower body, that's probably where we see the most risk. Sheep hit gates and then gates hit people. So that's one big issue we see as well, and that's where we need to be very aware and vigilant. Righto, now we're going to look at the flight zone and balance line of a mob of sheep. So we've got our mob of sheep here. A lot of these sheep are looking directly at me, so we'll talk about the balance line first, which is the line that runs down between their ears and straight down their spine. So if I walk into these sheep directly, they feel the pressure and they turn one way or the other. So, this sheep's looking at me now, so if I go left, that sheep will want to go right, and if I come back out, I'll pick one to front up and look at me. So this sheep here is looking at me. If I go right, that sheep will go left. That covers off the balance lines, which is the line if an animal's looking straight at you. Now we're going to talk about flight zone. So each individual animal has a flight zone, which is a line slightly back of the shoulder or the wither, but your whole mob actually has a flight zone. And that's probably where you need to be more aware of your mob flight zone with sheep than your individual animal flight zone. So these sheep are facing away from me at the minute. So if I want them to go that way, I will walk in here behind the flight zone and those sheep will go forward. I'll come back out. But if I walk in here, see how the flight zone reacts differently. As I get closer, the pressure comes on, they move away from the pressure. So some sheep need more pressure. These ewes have been around the yards for a day or so now. They've had a bit of handling, so they actually need more pressure than others, where some sheep will run quite freely and they wouldn't even be standing up to me here. Another thing that some people are not quite aware of is our presence works on the flight zone. So we all, as people, have a presence and we can focus that presence on an animal to get an effect. So it's basically a straight line from where your feet are pointing and where your eyes are pointing, there is a line. And sheep and cattle can feel that presence and they often don't like to cross it if they're looking at it. So you can actually block an animal or stop an animal with your presence, or you can then release that pressure and an animal will turn. I'll get these sheep to walk off and go through this gate here in a minute. So you wait, you'll stand and you'll look, right, these sheep are looking, you open the gate, walk away and make sure your presence is pointing away, your feet and your eyes are away. Keep walking until you've got to start. Turn back, you can slow the flow of these sheep so they don't go too fast. take the pressure off so the last one comes out. So there you go. So that is an example of how you can start and stop a mob of sheep with your presence and slow them down if you need to. So the next stage of the process is drafting sheep. When it comes to safety and drafting, you need to try and keep your body parts out of the draft and keep your hands and fingers where you can remove them quickly, so on top of the gates rather than up and down where they can be crushed. And you just need to try and keep your body parts as much out of the way as possible and use the gates to slow them down. Righto, so we're going to run through some drafting techniques and keeping your sheep running and some safety on the draft gates. So Declan is there on the draft gates. He's got his hands on top of the pegs. You keep your hands up on top of the pegs rather than on the side so you can avoid crushes from sheep jumping in you and that sort of thing. That way you can get them out of the road quickly if you need to, and avoid using your knees or your hips or your legs to block sheep in the draft. Use the gates instead. So we're going to flick this gate open. So you walk down and then you'll come back out away from the draft, come back up to your point here. And if sheep are running, stand still. You don't need to keep overworking a draft. Often we do see people overwork a draft and you can prevent the sheep from actually running. So if they're running, watch your force, come back in if there's a block, release the block, come back out, and the sheep will keep running. If there is a block and the sheep block up, hey Rube, come up here, hey Rube, Ruby come. So dog to the front, unclear the blockage, sit, 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 take the pressure right off, go back. Beautiful. That's sheep drafting 101, less is more. Sheep are easiest to catch in a big mob or in a tight pen, so where possible, get the sheep that you're trying to catch into a smaller pen as possible with other sheep. Obviously, there are some animals that just physically can't be lifted. If you don't think you're capable of lifting the animal, find an alternative way by letting it walk to a gate or an opening in the fence, or opening a panel if you can do so, and let the sheep go that way on its feet. Righto, so we're just going to run through the safety points in catching a sheep. So the first thing you do, you get your eye on your sheep you want to catch, you find the smallest yard you can, for example this one. So then you'll just go through, you keep your eye on your sheep that you want to catch. You'll take enough to take up the space in that small yard. So leave enough space that you're not wedged in, jammed in. But you need to work the sheep around as close as you can to where you need to lift. Look, in an ideal world, you use a gate or something like that, but we're pretending in this situation there's no other options. Turn the sheep around onto your strong side, a hand under the chin. So while you've got, and I've got my knee in her flank, so the best way to control an animal of any size in the sheep world is have your hand under its chin, and you will have as much control over that animal as possible. If you've got it back here, see how she fights me and tries to get away, but as soon as I put my hand under her chin, she's as calm as a sheep can be in this situation. So then you'll grab her, there's a flap here down in her flank. Move your other arm down here to a flap on her brisket. Pull her up like that, so she's sitting comfortably. Bend your knees, lift with your knees, sit her up on the fence like that. Let her sort of see where she's going. You can release the animal down like that, and away she'll go. So that is textbook lifting a sheep when you have to. In an ideal world, you'd come in, find the sheep you want to catch, hand under the chin, back her in a corner, you flick a gate, let her go, sheep walks out. In an ideal world, that's how you catch and relocate your sheep into the pen that you need. But if you have to lift the animal, you go with the previous method. This video's
about being safe, but it's also about continuing to work in the way that we know and love in our industry. Make sure you're taking your safety as paramount, because it has a huge impact on your colleagues, your family, your friends, but also the broader industry. I'm really passionate about being able to physically handle livestock in the way that we use it, but we need to incorporate safe techniques so we continue to operate in this environment, in this way. But make sure you're coming home to your family, your friends, and you're not having an impact on the industry that we work.